Mook friends, the previous video was really long, so let's keep things swift and to the point tonight. So as you guessed from the title and the thumbnail, we're making a logging road diorama for the 3D printed Pacific P16. As always, the skeleton of the scenery is made from styrofoam, but this time, things are gonna be a bit more complex, and as such, I found it easier to construct the basic volumes from multiple pieces. All of this junk styrofoam is from my shed, and the various thicknesses I found are actually very useful here. This also led to the idea to make the scene pretty tall. The added elevation should emphasize the atmosphere of a truck somewhere high up in the mountains. This initial construction is when we create the composition of the scene, the most important part of every single diorama. And a lot of it is often spent just looking at the thing and trying different angles. But once we get this part out of the way, it's time for some more visually exciting steps, such as adding large rocks made from tree bark. This method is something I wanted to try for years, and I always thought it would be in a North African scene. Bark is awesome because of its texture, but also because it can be easily modified with a razor saw to fit the scene, such as on this side. Or, conversely, the styrofoam base can be quickly sculpted with one of the hot cutter attachments to integrate the bark into the terrain. Yuck! Small pebbles and rocks collected outside are another great material. As you'll see, we're going from the largest to the smallest terrain features, and these two types are ideally glued in place before we even start adding the terrain. Speaking of which, I think it's a good time to start working on that. This upper section with the slight overhang is quite flimsy, so I used the AK acrylic paste to reinforce it, and even added one extra rock up there. While the paste was drying, I grabbed the super lightweight acrylic foam putty from Bergswerk. This foam is very easy to apply and the process is relatively clean. It also dries pretty fast, and I primarily used it to fill the holes between the individual pieces of styrofoam. Not just on the sides where it creates a better foundation for the veneer, but also in the scene where I smoothed out the harsh edges of individual pieces. Compared to my previous works, this so far looks like the messiest diorama ever, but it's all a part of the process, trust me. While the foam was still soft, I added some extra pebbles here and there, and with that, let's just start sculpting the terrain. I like to prep the surface by adding tons of small holes that increase grip and trigger my trypophobia. See, for the actual terrain, VMS Smart Mud 2.0 is my absolute favorite. It's soft, light, not sticky. Here are the wheels that I'm gonna use to add ruts in the road, and the VMS weathering carrier will be essential as well. All of that no stickiness is the best and also the worst part of it. When the styrofoam is too smooth, it just doesn't want to stick to it. That's why I added the holes. If you're into dioramas, this is the one and only mud paste you'll ever need to sculpt the terrain. So here you have links where you can get it and also discount codes for a better price. And while you're at it, get the light type weathering carrier as well, because here's the thing. Although the foam isn't sticky at all, pressing hard against it, be it with spare tank tracks or rolling and pressing wheels on top of it, will often result in the foam getting torn out and messing up the texturing tool of your choice. This enamel weathering carrier, however, creates a bulletproof barrier between the two, making the texturing process a breeze, keeping your tools clean and creating absolutely fantastic results. Here, in this highly sophisticated time-lapse, you can see how many times I had to dry fit the model to ensure the truck sits firmly in the soft ground, and also that the tire marks line up with its wheels. But once this was done, the rest was super chill. Basically, I just covered the rest of the scene with the mud, blending all of the different terrain features, and creating the final relief of the scenery. Once the foam dries, it's rock hard, and the diorama isn't such an eyesore anymore. Let's now add the logs, and for this we'll need some long and straight twigs, a razor saw, a metal wire brush, and Tamiya putty. Every log had to be precisely adapted to line up with the edge of the diorama, so the process wasn't super fast. I had a bigger saw in my toolbox in the past, but I threw it away after not using it even once. We also need to cut the other end because these trees weren't broken, but cut down. This right here is the reason I'm using real twigs. The bark, however, is too out of scale, and we can make it better, so I'll sculpt it with the Tamiya putty. While it was still soft, I scraped it with the metal wire brush, adding the gnarly bark texture. This can be done as many times as you like. To add more visual interest, I added some chips in the bark, and these will be emphasized later with paint. And then it was just about supergluing the log in place while keeping it lined up with the edge. And repeating multiple times, of course. I spent a good portion of the evening creating this pile, but it's the strongest piece of visual storytelling in this diorama. Alright, time to get rid of the last traces of the ugly styrofoam using oak veneer. I was in a really tight situation here because it seemed I wouldn't have enough veneer for the whole scene, and although I ordered several sheets after finding this out, I couldn't afford to wait for the package to arrive. Luckily, after some serious mental gymnastics, I managed to cut all 4 walls out of it and glued them one by one with PVA glue. I think I'll stop using double-sided tape for this job because although the PVA takes way longer to cure, the bond is much stronger and... No! God! So yeah, after fixing the damage on the truck for the second time, I glued all the walls in place, leaving each one to dry for an hour or two. Next, it was time to trim the excess. For this, there are 2 efficient methods that I know of. Taking the machinist approach and grinding the excess away with a rotary tool is definitely the easiest way. The second method is using a fresh hobby blade and carefully shaving off the excess. Don't get cut, and while you're at it, make sure to make the edge nice and wavy for extra eye candy. I'm always surprised by all the exotic shapes in the veneer, especially the profile of the log pile. But hey, that's not all. We need to blend the edges with the ground using the VMS mud paste, and on the other surfaces, I use Tamiya putty, such as on the rocks, or even better, the logs, where I once again repeated the bark texturing process with a metal wire brush. Let's now add the ground texture. Sifted gardening substrate, decorative sand from a dollar store, and real earth from my garden, trademark, mixed with fine gravel, and ballast freeze. This type of texture is easy because you already know the drill even if you've never seen this technique before. Sprinkle the natural scatter on the base and soak it with ballast freeze. If we try hard enough, we can always find a system in everything, including this. You see, what works best for me is to sort of layer these different materials on top of each other. I started with the sifted gardening substrate because this is the texture that will cover absolutely everything, except the ruts in the road. Then the larger stones which are seen in reference images, and finally I blended these 2 textures together with the fine gravel and dirt. VMS mud paste is porous, so it will soak up the excess ballast freeze, so there's no need to be shy. I also decided to add a few tufts of grass. In hindsight, I think this was a mistake because there's absolutely no grass in these forests, and any semblance of vegetation gets immediately obliterated by heavy machinery. But yeah, it's already there, so we'll see what can be done with it as we move on. The final natural detail is dried fine roots from various plants from my garden, trademark. And you don't even have to visit BC to see these kinds of details, it's common everywhere. So let's wrap the construction stage with a good coat of wood stain. I like to apply it before I start painting the ground because it's not the most precise job in the world. I use sponges for a smoother application, and the wood stain can sometimes seep into the groundwork. I usually apply 3 to 4 layers for a nice semi-dark finish. So here we have it all ready for painting, and with the truck in place, it's already a pretty impressive piece of real estate. Alright, let's start painting, and for the initial airbrushing, a piece of masking tape will be more than welcome. I think the days of me soaking the entire diorama in layers of dark primer are gone. It's not that it's a bad technique or anything, I just don't see much need for it anymore. Anyway, yellowish green tones on the grass, And for the earth color itself, I simply referenced my previous video and mixed the same tone as I used on the truck. Go check it out, by the way. I've put all of my passion and effort into it, and it was a lot of work. So, pretty straightforward so far, right? Let's now paint the large rocks, and for that we'll need these acrylics. The method of choice here is the so-called wet blending technique, and as the name implies, it's all about applying these paints one on top of each other without giving them too much time to dry. Essentially, we're mixing them together on the surface and letting the awesome jagged texture of the bark do the heavy lifting. Of course, not everything can be done wet on wet, so if we let them to dry, we can apply the next effects in a much more controlled manner. Essentially, it's all about starting with the darkest tones and finishing in the lightest ones. Also, I find it essential to avoid pure gray tones. This would lead to unnatural cold results, so instead go for grayish browns, sandy and tan colors. By the way, let me know what you think about those bark rocks, especially when we compare them to these real pebbles. Is the result authentic, or does it just look like painted bark? Personally, I think the illusion is good enough, and it's just fun to work with the material, so I'll be definitely finding excuses to use them in my future dioramas as well. Now for the boring part, and seeing the bottles you probably know what's coming. Yep, painting the ground with the same enamels as I used on the truck. Again, go see the truck painting video if you're urged to know more intensified. Even though I find this method tedious and kinda boring if I'm honest, is the best that I know of, especially if we need to strike balance between the tones we apply to the model and the ground it's standing on. There just must be a visual link of sorts between these two, otherwise the model will always look out of place. Needless to say, all of these AK paints, and not just these but everything, you can get all of that at a better price if you click the affiliate link in the video description and use the current sales coupon. Each purchase helps me out and you'll be doing yourself a favor as well, because their stuff is top shelf. And you know what else is cash money? The diorama. We haven't done much painting so far, but it already looks like a proper logging road somewhere on Vancouver Island. So let's now paint the rocks with these two. This might come off as strange, because when I decide to paint each individual stone, I usually go with at least 5 different colors for natural variety. But on these roads, it seems like the coarse gravel was brought by trucks as a way of reinforcing the road. In real life, this kind of gravel is pretty much white, but we sometimes need to tone things down to strike some visual balance. In this case, the dark road determined my color choice. This was the biggest amount of rocks I had to paint in a single scene, but I think the entire night I spent doing that was worth it. It's like we cranked up the graphics from low to ultra with RTX on. While we're at it, let's continue with more acrylics. I'm finally taking care of the eye-soaring unpainted locks. I tried a few approaches off camera on those at the bottom, but the most efficient method yielding the same quality result was to start by slapping some diluted grayish and rusty tones directly on the body. I'm not even kidding, although it looks absolutely awful now, doesn't it? But give me a sec and give this paint a try. If you look at pretty much any tree out there, you'll notice that most of the time the bark is very dark and very gray. The black wash does an amazing job highlighting the sculpted texture, but it goes beyond that. When you repeat this heavy application 2 or 3 times, it'll act as a heavy filter as well, drastically changing the surface, and things suddenly become to look much more realistic. But again, it's a part of a process, and there's always a bit of back and forth involved. So here, I'm adding more rust tones because the trees that are harvested in BC have a distinct reddish texture. And then I very carefully applied the grayish and deck tan acrylics with the dry brushing method. This brings out every bit of texture that I sculpted, and I gotta say, it's a pretty easy yet effective method. The chips in the bark and the cuts were treated with the rusty tone as well, and the exposed roots were also painted with the same acrylics, but the effect looks different because they were base coated with a dusty color. Okay, so we have successfully painted every surface feature, and we can call this project done. Just kidding. Next, we are going to add the mist that comes with the logging industry. This means branches made from broken twigs and roots, bark shavings scraped from real bark, and even whole sections of bark with a realistic, rounded profile. I studied my references immensely for these final steps, because on one hand, I wanted to capture that distinctive look accurately, but on the other, I didn't want to mess things up too much and destroy all of the previous work. The intensity of the destruction varies a lot, but I'm very familiar with this phenomenon. If you thought I'd leave these shavings untouched, then I have some bad news for you. In some places, where the layer of bark was really thick and the amount of fixer had to be higher as well, the bark stayed dark and saturated. So I had to repaint it with a rusty color mixed from Tamiya whole red and flat yellow. Just like on the truck, I used the enamel matte tone and a dark wash to blend the bark with the ground. This was applied sparsely because I wanted to keep the piles of bark visible, like really in your face, just like in my references. Although there are spots, such as the rods, where I completely integrated the bark into the ground. The twigs received the same treatment as the big logs. I only had to apply the basic grayish-brown tone, then the black wash, and then a quick dry brush, and suddenly they look much better. Here I also employed a bright skin color to simulate the fresh wood, a sort of chipping for twigs. My eyes were really starting to get tired after all of this fine painting, but that didn't stop me from noticing small particles in the gardening substrate, and if we paint them, they'll look like fresh wood shavings. So what do you say? If nothing else, it shows how many interesting effects and different textures we can cram into one small piece of scenery. Even though, when we look at it from afar, half of the details disappear. Oh, what's that? That, my friends, are the final details. Tree branches made from plumosa fern. The last time I used this stabilized plant was on my yak tiger, and that was a long time ago. These days, we have 3D printed super realistic branches from RT Diorama, but I needed a lot of them, and I would need to push them into various tight places, so I went for this old school method instead, even though it's not as authentic. Basically, I made 2 sets of fir branches. One set is fresh, the other is completely dried out. Once again, I used real-life references, although here I was mainly concerned with the aesthetics, not hard realism. So it's a process that involves 2 steps: finding a suitable branch for the spot, and then finding a way to place it naturally and secure it in place. Speaking of that, I used super glue because I needed an immediate bond, and some were used to visually integrate the logs into the groundwork, while others were placed quite clumsily out in the open, all intentional of course. Because I like my scenery contained inside the boundaries of the diorama, the excess branches were snipped away. And then it was about giving them a bit of detail painting using the same grayish and deck tan colors like I used on the broken twigs or the logs. Really fun if you ask me, so much that I'm keen to use these again on some other model. Take a look and let me know your thoughts. I know the plumosa fern isn't a 100% scaled down replica of needle branches, but apart from that, does it look like a busy logging road to you? Like and comment. At this point, I could glue the Pacific in place and paint its driver. That's right, Aladdin Model created a custom posed driver figure for it, of course, based off references I sent them. I'm not gonna give you a figure painting tutorial tonight because this is not my finest job. Some of the folds and details in the sculpt are a bit shallow, but on the other hand, a true master can paint an ancient Italy figure and make it look like a real-life person. The only problem is that I'm not a master, but you know what? I'll take it. The painting is good enough to a point where it doesn't drag the overall impression down, and it shows the true size of the Pacific P16. And finally, I made a custom nameplate for the diorama, or should I say, a custom license plate. Well, the name tag is more focused on the truck itself, not the scene, because this diorama primarily serves as a decorated display stand for the model. This is an authentic Canadian license plate from the 80s. I just changed the dates to match the year, month, and day when I finished the model. Let me know how it resonates with you, because I had a more traditional design in mind, but ultimately decided for a more esoteric placard. I even created a voting poll on Patreon and my folks went ballistic. Alright, my friends, two things I wanna say. If this video felt a bit rushed compared to the previous one, it's because it was. I wanted to finish it before I left to do a live demo in France, not because I felt pressured, but because I knew I could do it. And second, I finished this diorama in a week. I lost 2 days because I threw the original composition away and started all over again, but you know what? It felt good. My work on the P16 was really slow and tedious, so it felt nice to see that I still had it in me. You know, to bite down, stay focused, and don't stop until the job was done. Overall, I'm extremely proud of this model, and I'm definitely keeping this one. Why am I saying that? Well, because I'm selling my models on my website. Go check it out. And while you're at it, I also have merch on another website. Check that out as well. Okay, the next model is going to be a model, that's for sure. Not a 3D printed one, we're going back to plastic. And I won't say anything else because I don't know either. Maybe it'll be a rust bucket from World War II or a muddy modern tank. I just don't know. Right now my priority is to pack everything for the France trip and don't miss the airplane. So yeah, thank you all for your support, because without you, I wouldn't even have this model, and I wouldn't have this job either without this amazing community. It truly means the world to me. And special thanks goes to my patrons. Their help allows me to leave my house in the morning and drive to the city to buy a bouquet of plumosa fern, and if you're one of them, thank you so much, because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have the privilege of building models full time. If it weren't for the YouTube community, I wouldn't have a Patreon community, so it's like a small codependent ecosystem. You'll get a lot of cool stuff if you join me on Patreon. I post regular updates, share work in progress photos, various thoughts and observations from the workbench, and we keep in touch through DMs, comments and emails. Top tier patrons get early access to all of my videos, completely ad-free, and recently I started a new Patreon exclusive format called Night Shift Throwback, where I go back and react, so to say, to the latest video, geeking out about specific techniques and various nuances in extreme detail. Basically, it's for all of you modeling nerds who want to gain as much information as possible, but all that extra info would make these YouTube videos feel like a slog. For example, the first video was an hour long. There are also bonus extras like 3D printable parts for your own projects, reference photos from real-life locations, and high-res studio shots of all of my models that show way more detail than video ever could. Your financial support is appreciated, but never expected. Again, let me know your thoughts about this whole project, and once I return from France, I'll start working on the next model. And remember, build your models, don't just hoard them. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!